something she had at the time. That's really odd, but it happens like it was him. It's the rest of the terrible. Late 19, dead down the broken garden. In response, in case she needed to repeat, Ozzy gave she was still breathing, so I don't know what those concerns that being hurt. She also reported the feeling of fear from the doctors think they're over. There was the point. Appeared to be fairly toxic, like there was no drugs in the system. She was still exploring every possible angle of the game, but it seems difficult enough which initially didn't. Initially, there was no perception of attacking things and telemetry reporting attack, but the officer who advanced him would later say after further investigation that the results were inconclusive. And meanwhile, it seemed that there was no insight into his corner. On June 18th, the next day, this was his case, called the Russian city of the she claimed something had broken and she managed to escape, but she didn't know the potential attack was still inside. Ozzy then and back. This is, more than anything, based on his strong impression behind all this. More than a year later, Cindy was attacked again in the business day in a park while walking high from a urban community. Later that same night, Cindy was clearly under the influence of something as she frantically tried to adjust her favor to prevent her own habits. She was taken hostage once again. It was locally found to prevent her arm. While there as well, it was evident that a strange photo was spoken in the absence of the economy. The metrical line then began to ask the receptionist questions from the hospital security staff and protocol. And sometime later, police player reported was explained to see if she recognized it as a bank of that night. She told us that it sounded like the same man. Another little while later, it was a stranger from the summer of 1985 when Cindy had been involuntarily committed to a psychiatric ward for and things. This gave police warm of his without ever should have wanted that morning. Then, in a separate incident, as 1985 came to a look, Susan Cooper spotted something that they had shown on 6 p.m. for the 19th of December. It was sick. She was discovered found with apparently bruises all over her body, flat and unstopped, tied around the neck, and also similar to other attacks. Cindy had needle punctured into her arm, and police believed that she was injected with a tranquilizer. After she was taken to the hospital, the Cindy had filled out how she could be bitch. Another couple of months later, in 1986, her small dad and book, Tom and Egg started to spend nights at her place. On one occasion, Cindy woke the couple up in the middle of the night after taking out downstairs. Tom, however, was all good because he heard it too. Then, when they investigated, they found that Cindy's baby was in his room. Egg had been ready to go, but the line of calls and tracks had come out the front door to see the young neighbors on the fire. Like he did, he saw Cindy outside the house. Unfortunately, no one has not approached him, but they ran off. Incredibly, despite the fact that there were 2 other witnesses to what happened after the police believed Cindy stayed the entire day, there were no signs of forced entry. The fire had undoubtedly started inside the house. When they checked the exact overdose of ground, investigators also found that the dust of any of them disturbed the video unlikely that someone climbed through them. All of this was just sheer accusing. Either way, the police had followed the money, Cindy stayed the home with Tom and Egg, and they found it strange that she refused to leave and sometimes remarked that her life was worth living. Cindy was also being treated by a psychiatrist, and around the same time, he'd seen and heard about the condition of some specialist treatment. She was then placed in a psych ward at the hospital, where she received a comprehensive evaluation for 10 a day. Unfortunately, though, this didn't change anything. Cindy would continue to fund the police report from 1987 to 1988. Then, on October 11, 1988, lawyers from Manchester reported 2 string investigations. One of which was a strongly worded threat on Cindy's life. Then, about 2 weeks later, Cindy was attacked again. When she was discovered, unconscious inside her garage with a black stalking on her neck. This time, she was hospitalized. They investigated this incident, which suddenly says he's being contact. She examined the way Cindy's high. More than anything, though, they went to the Chinese hospital. She could have tied herself down. She was yelling to the to the property and sprayed them for the right pain. Graffiti was exactly uncommon to her cross behind her, but fun to read of it from the street woman. Delicious flavor, taste for one. So, we are coming back on here to continue our discussions on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Because as more information and as more talking points come out, it opens the door to broader discussion between the NHL fan bases and whichever teams could be involved here. Now, before we dive into everything, I just wanted to give a big shout out to Brad. Because in yesterday's video, we ended up speaking about the Detroit Red Wings Erik Karlsson trade price, and in this commentary, I had spoken out about how Erik Karlsson has a very interesting situation, stating that his salary is not actually being paid for by the Penguins. He has an $11.5 million day-to-day cap hit, and that is displayed on elite prospects, for example. If you go over to EP, Karlsson just has this number on his cap hit, which if we actually check it out, I mean, it's still there. There you go, $11.5 million a year for Erik Karlsson. I said that it was kind of difficult to fully have that be in place because Erik Karlsson, while he does have an $11.5 million cap hit, the Penguins are not paying him. Instead, they're paying him $10 million because when Karlsson got traded, there was salary retention from San Jose. Well, I wanted to give a shout out to Brad because he emailed me the other day and spoke about how, Pittsburgh themselves is doing with the Penguins and with a page on top media. This is where you can see the accurate dollar amount for Erik Karlsson and his Penguins cap hit. So they're making $10 million a year to his Pittsburgh salary, even though the player himself is making $11.5. Now, that does not dismiss the issue that says that, hey, if you're on Erik Karlsson's page and you want to see how much he's making against Pittsburgh's cap, that's not available to you on this website right here. You have to go over to the Pittsburgh Penguins and their cap situation to get the unfiltered and post-retention number. There are a number of things that I think you can try to figure this out, but also I was speaking about how when Cap Friday was in collaboration with any prospects, the regular cap hit on this page would show the post-retention cap hit, so it would say 10. But if you scroll over the full contract details, this is where the full cap hit will be displayed. So I think it is kind of confusing on the front. I'm excited for this. Yeah, no, they honestly both look good too. These are their new businesses. They'll both be good cash in a month, okay? So this person just asked, which proposal do you think is suited? Between Team Oxford, Team Mac, what do you guys think? How many times am I going to have to say the word team is necessary? I mean, look at these gentlemen. It looks like they just broke out of the prison from the 1800s. Yeah, honestly, the blood out just the most relevant for this. But the ability has been, especially in the winter games, it really just comes down to whether or not you like poison or shoving. Oh, you tell me. No, not no. Joe, shut the fuck up. Several months later, Trump pulled up which became the Vancouver Park. I mean, it's full of her, they got him started. He was getting committed. He was just a comprehensive strategy, right?
It's just behind the scenes at first I think it's consistent. Get a feed on the field. That's what we said. It does, yeah. And let's have a small push on
comes to it. The couple of them,
You guys don't see
that was it doesn't want to get things. Athletic shoes, but no nuts. No nuts of any kind. Gentlemen and daughters, about to depart on a journey that could result in our death, a journey that must be done. Like that already. You've been good brain here. So that's the one before. I'm just happy to be invited back. Really looking forward to the Bigfoot with y'all with us. Thank God for considering us to get invited to take that in. Man, Donald, you're in a friend of mine. You just died like it's a freaking kid. Yo, welcome back. We're ready to see what you can do. You better not even think about going, or we'll jump you off the sure. Don't worry, man. I'm ready to put it all on the line like a huge dream baby going to Alabama for the first time. That's what we like to hear. Let's not see get the big thing. And let the last development process get the judge to stay together. Just so you all better not even think about taking the AR. I'm the only one in here who supports the NRA. You're the only one in here who supports the McDonald's with the White House kid fellow. Oh, we got more. This is Scott, yada, yada, yada. They found blood. Thought it was an infection. Now no one knows. But we sure as hell do. Lock and tell the force. I supported the NRA too. You can't take all the credit for it. You're right. I forgot about that. I'm not the only Republican anymore in the video. Dang well. There goes anti-roast responsibilities. Hey, don't worry, Tom. You'll find something else to do. I don't need to worry about anything if I can get the right one before anything. I'd like to see the Bigfoot try to cook me when I got my big-ass gun. I ain't letting you get the little crappy pea shooter, Donald. You keep thinking you're going to get something, but you'll be lucky if you let you get a butter knife. I personally want the sniper rifle. I heard that's the strongest one in the game, and I want to utilize it as much as possible. Joe can't aim. Donald probably can't hold it. Bush? Well, I don't know anything about Bush, so we'll just have to see. I only have a block man. How long is going to get you to cook this meat with me? I definitely don't know what to do with it. If he runs up on me, you're going to cook. Probably going to be safer if you don't have anything. Oh no, we should buy everything up equally so we can put this back and down and Bigfoot. Don't forget Big Bro generates like Wolverine. Anybody that has any guns will be very neat. I have to block, and I want all the cameras. Don't hold out on the line to the ground either. If you don't want to go out on the line, I have to set up a big shoot. I think I got some, Joe. I'll give it to you, but in return, I want that 76 too. I got the crappy rifle that shoots basically airsoft bullets. Make sure you guys are searching everywhere. We're going to need everything we can get to build this thing. Gonna need your own to shots too, but I doubt that's going to happen. Joe probably couldn't even hit him with a shotgun. That's why I'm fact we're going to have the essence plan. You can't really get them on the road. You're like us at Orange Man. Don't worry, I practice all the time. I got the first time on the firing rate with an out-there zone. George, did you slow the heck down there? I mean, seriously, you think my overweight self can run that far that fast? You're going to get caught out and die. I got to exercise. God's wisdom combined today's ridiculous and bullshit damn play in the middle of summer. If we took his stuff, better not run like you did the previous play. And Joe, all you do is scream like a little girl and you know, violent Jackson. You saying that stuff, but I don't remember. Then you don't remember when you ate the breakfast either, Joe. You struggle to remember basic stuff, so something that happened like a year ago wouldn't surprise me. So does that mean we're just going to use Joe as bait, or we actually going to work together to get this video? I mean, it's like 50-50 depending on the situation. And what happens when the Bigfoot attacks? Best case, you get used as a decoy. So when he's tossing you around like a doll, we can drop his ass like Obama dropped the ball in Afghanistan. Anyone else getting freaking framed off? No, I mean, super you think this dude is getting constant 240 FPS on this game, not no damn thing. What in the world is happening? Real quick, the track in 2020 garbage show, time to join the last of the 3,000 series. That's what the true gamers use. I actually have a 48, so the show looks fun. I actually have a 48. Shut your ass up, Obama. You don't even buy cheap-ass games we play, but you're saying you can get like a 1K GPU. Yeah, I ain't buying that. You're playing on some trash. Make a wish out. It's different when we can buy one GPU that lasts like a decade, another game that we play for a week and never touch again. Y'all see that tree almost kill me? Stay close, you guys. This kid might actually get rough. Nah, I'm ready for everything that comes my way. If anything bad happens, I know how to skedaddle up out of here. I don't even think the Bigfoot hunts on night one, does he?
I don't think last time we played he didn't hunt on night one. I believe it was night two when he started to chase and hunt us.
Now, he'll see all four of us and instantly get scared, run away, and we're going to have to chase him.
See, he's new here. The Bigfoot don't do that shit. He sees us and does his whole pick you up and toss you around thing. Then we shoot him, making him run off. If you ask me, I think he'll try to be harder this time. I did raise the health of him a tad bit, so we're going to have more of a challenge, which will be fun.
You really think our stupid selves need more of a challenge? We're literally like the whole 10 chromosomes combined between all of us, 9. If you put Joe's negative amount. Hey, 10. Don't sound too bad. That sounds pretty high. It's in the double digits at least. Heck, I couldn't do that on those tests in middle school. Oh, baby, I got me a DD shotgun. Lady Pill face still.
Wait, when you that stuff that hit when you need it. Joe, you better hit your shots or we're going to teach you for that weapon. It'd be more useful in McDonald's hands because you always are the first one to die at games like this. Call me technically because I never die. I'm invincible. Just watch when the Bigfoot attacks, I'll be ready to cook and ready to put him down.
You know, sometimes weapons are faulty. There could be a misfire and Joe would accidentally lose his shotgun and just say the word boys. Nah, keep together strong in the situation. We need to stay together in this situation being Joe raised his health, which I still think was a bad idea, but hell, what do I know? I'm only the president.
Man, shut up, Donald, you know. Damn well that we're all past presidents. Just because you're the current one don't mean jack. You're probably still younger than us. Well, maybe not, Joe. Dude, what did I do to catch another stray? You guys are just trying to make me feel all warm inside today, aren't you?
Trying to cover you up with that little frail skin of yours. We need everyone to be on Iron Man mode when shit hits the fan. I feel like I'm in Vietnam walking through all these trees. What if the Bigfoot is just casually stalking us like a leopard does with its prey?
Well, I don't fucking know way better or something. Asking for a follow. What's that app you have again? It's like Twitter or something. It's called Truth Social, but the only truth to it is the dollar is the message. And spend more time on the toilet than your atmosphere.
Oh, dang, that reminds me. Can you follow me back on Twitter and Instagram? I sent them like last week and I know you saw.
Please follow your DE ass. Yeah, that's a no for me, dog.
I'm pretty sure I'll be into both of those platforms, so I'll have to check. I get info them every other day to be fair. But some guys, I thought we were actually friends now. Why did y'all invite me back if I can't even get a follow from you guys?
Well, you're like a Tim. You're here, but you're not actually here. You have to earn a spot on the OG president list. Until then, you're a fill-in. Not trying to bring anything up, but if you guys have 2 guns, you need to give me one. I'm over here like Gimli when I want to be Legolas.
Hey man, we'll let you know when we find him. Someone check Bush's pockets. That mug probably has a Glock stashed somewhere.
Yo, I ain't got nothing but the trashy 7.62, man. You know, if I found something, I'd be flexing it. Why don't you get in your Glock?
Oh, I forgot I already did give him my Glock. Damn, the dementia really is cooking me.
I know I have my Glock, but I don't want a pea shooter. I want a rifle. I want to be the embodiment of the Second Amendment.
Well, be happy you got something, you dumbass. Don't be bleeding like Joe was when you're doing your insider trading. Tony, I wasn't supposed to say that.
I think I traded in the White House for diamonds for some netherlands on the Minecraft server.
Damn, we all both got a Minecraft server too. Y'all really gatekeeping all the other presidents from this stuff like Donald is gatekeeping people from coming into the country.
Dude, Joe, stop outing our side game.
Leaving crap I didn't know we weren't supposed to say nothing about it. I thought we were just... Never mind.
Great, now voice is going to leak it to everyone. Good job, Professor Oldhead. You just killed our place of safety.
Look, I didn't remember. I gave Obama the clock. What makes you think I remember the server was just for us? Maybe if you actually spend some of that bullshit though, you'd have on the realm that actually could support more than 5 players. We'd get more people.
I'm done talking about this. You just supposed to be banned from it. Anyone seen the Bigfoot yet? I swear he should be somewhere in these woods. There's only so many places he can be.
He doesn't hunt the first night bush. You all need to slow it down. And let's focus on sticking together. Jesus, look at Joe on the map. Brother is so far back, might as well be driving a Model T. When that's Joe in front of me, Bush and Donald are the ones in freaking Narnia. Let's keep looking for supplies. Joe, they're going the other way, I think.
I was still searching that one campsite I'm about to pull up right now with you guys. I think Donald is still back there too.
Donald, hurry up and let's go. We don't want to be split up too long.
You don't keep going, you ain't gonna kill me. I'm too big of a meal anyway for him. He'll probably leave me alone. Hey, don't put that negativity out there, Donald. You're not that big. Haven't you seen those people on TikTok who straight eat like 6 large pizzas and you wonder how they do it?
I blame Michelle and her trying to force healthy food down their children's throat. Bring back actual school lunches. These Texas schools have freaking pizza, while my school had
A Model T parking lot eating freshly grown okra you picked from the fields? Bro, you ain't going back to your old ass ways where smoking in school was a normal thing.
Stop putting all the blame on Michelle. Donald over here is the spokesperson for Big Back Meeting. You can't blame her when she was the one who was driving you right.
Well, that's because you're married to her, so you're obligated to be here.
Good night. Push look out. Get down, Mr. President. There's a wolf. Oh, God, you're welcome. I saved your life.
That son of a bitch came out of nowhere. Thanks a lot, Joe. Pretty sure one of those fellas hit me, but hey, besides,
Is Donald still taking the freaking scenic route back to us? I'm not even joking, Donald. You're going to get killed by something that we ain't provided you.
shut up, Obama. You're just jealous. I'm going to find the AR before you all freaking just find it. You guys are just going to be crying about who gets it when in reality it's me who has it.
I don't care who has it. I just want to keep my shotgun and raise hell great soon. Anything that stands in my way, that with a shotgun shell.
Just so the viewers know, that's the equivalent of a Care Bear holding a plastic fork. Basically the equivalent of a threat.
Well, that plastic fork ain't got buckshot. So I'm just going to say it's not the equivalent. It's more like a Disney character who gets mad and tries to fuck. What the fuck, Joe? Shut that thing off and stop touching shit.
Yo, Obama had the code to the safe, and he just joined the AR. Yo, what the fuck, man? I thought we were going to share everything. You didn't even say you had the code.
I don't need to explain myself. I'm the most mentally capable here. Therefore, I get the best weapon.
Ain't no one saying that you asked you're 1 second away from accidentally being pushed off a cliff.
I'm wondering what the fireworks do. You think it's going to be one of those shitty sparklers or like a solid show?
You don't launch the fireworks. You don't launch the fireworks. God damn it, Joe. You gave away our position.
But that shit cost like $85 one of those two-big tea stands. Someone got ripped off hard in that school.
Joe, you're going to get us killed. Are you a Russian spy or something?
Shut up, Bush. This isn't no Call of Duty mission. It's literally just a game where we hunt the Bigfoot. He ain't gonna hunt us.
Well, what was that whole pep talk about, oh shit, he doesn't hunt the first night, he's going to come out tomorrow night? Like, what was that all about?
Oh, it's got you there, Obama. You did say that. He does go to the second night.
Well, you might not. I don't remember. Y'all gotta stop with the gang up and start focusing on Charlie and the trees type shit. We're in Vietnam right now. To be a collar in the trees. We'll need Joe and Bush and a dollar. So.
I didn't break the law or anything, so kid, rest your nerve. Dodging service like he's dodging releasing empty times.
What does the Bigfoot even look like? Did they update him or something, or did they just kill this game without any patches and are just living off the passive income?
Nah, they ain't updated this game since 1972 or some shit. The devs need to update this game because it low-key is one of the best.
Day 172 of wandering the forest in search for the Bigfoot. Rations so low as to our hopes of ever getting out of here. We're attempting to push west along the river in hopes he might be seeking water. Updates to follow.
Oh God, not this narration shit again. Obama, keep it to yourself, you idiot. We ain't trying to hear that.
I thought it was interesting. Maybe I want to hear it. You don't speak for the group. Don't stop acting like you did.
Sometimes Obama cooks me. It's honestly getting better. He used to suck and there was a bit of backstory. And honestly, I'd buy that movie if ever made it. Those old ass really just said DVD. Who even has DVDs anymore? You can get any movie online for some money, but you're over here watching shit like a freaking pilgrim.
Yes, that's what I hate about the future. My box set of Harry Potter is cooked because it's all online.
Hey man, I'm just saying, if the power goes out, you ain't got a generator. Don't come crying because I have every movie from the film like 2015 on DVD. Stay in your darkness while I'm over binge watching Holes.
Could have chosen a series or something, but no. Let's watch Holes for the 80th time. You gotta watch radio too. What the fuck is this? A rainy Friday in gym class.
I thought this game was supposed to be about a Bigfoot. The only thing I'm seeing is trees.
Maybe the Bigfoot is your big back ass. You're basically the same size as him.
It's not about winning the Bigfoot. It's about trying to make along the way.
Joe and his whole kumbaya bullshit really gonna make you start freaking out. We can use that shotgun. Just say the word boss.
They don't find anything. I was looking around and saw a cooler, but it only had watered down to Capri Suns.
I don't know. Let's push through this lane. Let's see if we can get back in camp before the Bigfoot turns into an assassin.
You keep talking like you're going to do something. All you do is yap about weapons of mass destruction. So let's get back to that bullshit instead of coming after me. I really don't want to get my Timbs wet. I bought them a few weeks ago for this run. Do you think they'll get damaged in the water?
Who even gets Timbs anymore? It's 2018. Get some waders or something. You're in the forest, not a friggin' basic.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear that Donald, otherwise I would lose all respect for you.
Yeah, when did you all become anti-Timbs? What did they do to you?
As soon as people saw them as fashion, instead of working hard, they used to be made for 30-year-old construction workers. Now they're used as proper teenagers who think it's stylish.
Good God, the Bigfoot attacks us right now. We're gonna die. We're in the middle of a freaking swamp. Might as well get the trim cell door.
What if there's more here because these guys sort of people who can speak to them? They've almost been nice people.
Don't say this, Joe. I hate snakes.
We are not going back in that water. That's how you get got.
Man, we got guns. We can kill the anaconda that tries to pull some shit. We're stacked up, locked and loaded, ready to end anything in our sight.
Hey, Bush, look at Plain. Thank God they're not present, otherwise something bad could happen. Phew.
Out of pocket joke, Joe. Guys, you can't let me get away with that.
Kevin, I've said worse behind the scenes. I'm pretty sure everyone has. Joe's still in the water anyway, so maybe the anaconda will eat him.
There might not even be an anaconda, y'all just making stuff up to scare us.
No, there wasn't one. Or if there was, it didn't want to eat these dumb anaconda from the chat. Now let's hope the Bigfoot doesn't try to cook us next.
We need to use the Texas strategy of holding a fort that might not be able to be held. Long live the Alamo. That's our next play. We need to bullet up defenses. Anyone got a spare M249?
Dude, no one has a M249. You barely got guns. And trust me, if I had an M249, that's all me. I ain't keeping up with y'all because I'll be better on the road.
Donald, the increase in the test lab. Where's all that going? We get to the position of you just used 28K toilets. I don't know. I just signed the paper. They cook with whatever they want. We have to make do with what we have, boys. We're going to be all right, though. Keep together strong. Never forget it.
Everyone take stock of what you have. I have a firework and some fuel. Make sure we utilize all that we have. We don't want anything to go to waste if we can use it to kill the beast.
I have half a stick of Orbit gum. Is that helpful?
Give that shit to Joe, brother. Got old man breath smelling like old lips and applesauce.
Ain't no one asking you to smell my breath, Marino. You got a crush on me or something. Lock it down, let's stick to the plan. I have a trap and some fuel cans.
I ain't gotta try. Maybe it'll be like a cartoon where the Bigfoot will smell it and pass out.
All right, if you have batteries, fuel, or fireworks, those are stun devices that can be used to make the Bigfoot start tweaking. We use it and unload on him. You're gonna have to shoot it though. Don't activate it until it's close. That means you, Joe, don't freaking light off fireworks again, so the Bigfoot doesn't find us in the first 5 minutes of nighttime.
All right, let's hold this campsite. Start placing your devices so we can make sure we're prepared in case he attacks early.
Fireworks and fuel would go good.
Ow. What the fuck, Obama? Why would you shoot it, you dumbass? You blew up my firework.
Take your flashbang.
Hey, that might have been Joe. I swear he was looking at it too.
Obama, why are you trolling? Stop doing that crap. We're already low on resources, and I'm pretty sure Joe ate the last granola bar.
Oh, come on, Joe. Dude, Joe. What the fuck?
I got hungry. I didn't know it was the last one.
You had to have known you would see an empty box if you took it. Now feed him to the Bigfoot that crosses the line. I second the motion. Joe is ruining the run. We're going to be down on stamina and health soon enough. We're going to have to make sacrifices.
These days, the best night out happens when you decide to stay in. Start building your dream backyard at Belguard.com.
Serve more ammo. Keep your eyes on the trees, gents. If it moves, it dies. That's the motto. I don't care if it's freaking Smokey the Bear you like that sumbitch up. We're not going down here.
Only you can prevent yourself from getting capped type shit.
I'm looking for any and all movement so far. Nothing. Are we even sure he hunts on night two? Maybe the extra health he has to be dormant for longer like a hibernating bear.
Just look out for the health bar at the top of the screen. If you see it, we're under attack. Disperse, and if you get focused, try to not die too quick so we can lay some lead down.
It's quiet. Too quiet. There's something out there. I feel like I'm being watched. Be prepared, boys. We're going into the heart of darkness together. Well, if we go into the heart of darkness, that means we won't be able to see Obama.
Bro, come on, Donald.
We won't be able to see you either, bro. We're in the dark. I know you're trying to make a joke about it, but you're not funny.
Bro, Donald, turn that zesty music off. We're not at a party or something. We're trying to kill a Bigfoot, not have a dance-off. Hey, bro, this is my groove. I swear it's got a nice vibe to it. Like you just got off a long shift and you're trying to relax.
More like trying to get freaky. Sounding like you're about to try to riz up someone.
I don't care what it sounds like. It's giving away our position, and the Bigfoot is going to storm through our camp at any moment. The last thing I want to hear when I die is some zesty music a Epstein List member was playing.
Man, I ain't going down. I'll outrun all you sons of bitches I used to play baseball, and by God, do I still got the legs.
Shut up, Bush. You got chicken little legs that couldn't outrun a Bigfoot or me. You're going to be left in the dirt.
I didn't store all this fat for nothing. I can run forever without the need for food because I'll use my stores.
That's not how that works, big fella. You need to have water, too. And judging by your last doctor's appointment, you are going to have to be a camel.
Hey, are y'all ready? Let's make sure our traps are placed good, and let's make sure we're not having to worry about any holes in our backside. Worst case, there's two, and we get flanked. There isn't two. It's always been one. We're going to be fine so long as we unload on the bastard when he pulls up. Crips versus Bloods type stuff.
I don't affiliate with either one. It's all Donald. So if you remember, don't come after me. Stop instigating Donald.
In 1874, 6 men set off into Colorado's San Juan Mountains, middle of winter, with the hopes of reaching some newly discovered gold fields on the other side. 2 months later, only a single man emerged from the mountains, but instead of being emaciated as early explorers were often later found, the man looked to be weirdly fed. This is the story of Alfred Packer, also known as the Colorado Cannibal. As a quick note, all the descriptions of the events in this video are fleeting, non-descriptive. They are still disturbing, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. On the morning of April 16, 1874. The men who worked at Los Pinos Indian Agency near Saguache, Colorado, were sitting and eating breakfast when the mess hall door suddenly flung open. In the doorway, surrounded by howling wind and a fierce snowstorm, was a man, disheveled and clearly distressed. He had rags over his feet instead of shoes, a long beard, a coffee pot hanging from a strap on one side, and a rifle over the other. After standing there for a second, he began to beg them for help. This man's name was Alfred Packer. General Charles Adams, who oversaw the agency, got his men to help Alfred to a table with some food, and because he was starving, he ate so quickly that he threw up. Then, over the first of many whiskeys, he told them about his horrific journey over the mountains. He explained that the others with him had become too exhausted to continue, that he got snow blindness and frostbite that he had left behind and fend for himself. For months afterward, rabbits, roots, and rosebuds, it was only his experience as a guide that got him out alive. Several months earlier, the party that Alfred eventually joined set up from Bingham Canyon, Utah on November 20th, 1873. They were part of a group of 20. They didn't know each other initially, except for the fact that they all wanted to be rich. This group was traveling to the newly found gold fields near Breckenridge in Colorado, which is a place where the newspapers claimed anyone with any sense could make a fortune. And in fact, when they started out, Alfred wasn't actually with them. The group happened to bump into themselves at Salt Lake City about 25 miles into their journey. Alfred asked them where they were going, and they told him they were heading to the gold fields. Alfred then offered his services. He claimed he was a guide and knew the territory between Utah and Breckenridge well. At first, they weren't sure about him because he seemed a little odd, but they thought having someone who knew where they were going was helpful, so they agreed to take him on. Unfortunately, Alfred actually had no idea where he was going. To call him only a little bit odd was being nice. However, he wasn't lying completely. He had worked as a guide for a few months. He just wasn't very good at it. He had a habit of getting lost and tended to get to arguments with his clients. He also had a reputation for stealing from people and lying, so those who knew him either didn't like him or didn't trust him, or both. When he was younger, Alfred served in the Union Army during the Civil War and enlisted twice, but the service only lasted a few months each time because he had epilepsy and was prone to seizures. This led to him being honorably discharged both times, and after being discharged, and in addition to being a guide, for a time he was employed driving horses and other draft animals from across the West. He also worked as a hunter and a range hand, and even did odd jobs for mining companies. He even tried mining in Colorado, but unfortunately, none of these jobs lasted long because he had such a bad attitude. No one could trust him. He was constantly getting fired. In any case, after offering to be a guide to the group in 1873, Alfred would manage to get them as far as just outside Montrose by getting lucky. But this first 260 miles or so hadn't been easy either. A couple of winters earlier, parts of the western and midwestern U.S. had been hit by the lowest temperatures on record. 1873 wasn't all that much better either, and the journey from Utah to Colorado was tough and slow. The trail they were following was covered in heavy snow, slowing down the wagons, making the most impossible to stick to a path. They followed a compass for a while, but eventually got lost anyway, and by January they were completely out of food. This forced them to begin eating horse feed and even thinking about eating the horses themselves. And if that wasn't bad enough, they had to put up with Alfred. They would later describe him as greedy, lazy, and constantly fighting with someone. By then, too, it was obvious that he wasn't the seasoned guide he claimed to be.
We, the Chief Human Resource Officer, swimming in problems is part of the job. But with SAP, AI agents use all the right data to make sure nothing stops you or your people.
A few weeks later, on January 21st, most of them had all but given up when they stumbled across the camp of a Native American band known as the Utes, led by a man named Chief Uray in a valley just outside Montrose. Contrary to popular belief, relations between Native Americans and prospectors weren't often hostile. So even though the men looked terrible, or possibly because they looked so terrible, Chief Uray gave the men food and offered them shelter. He even suggested that they stay with him until the weather got better. And the group knew that the next part of the journey would be just as challenging. They still had roughly 120 more miles of these San Juan Mountains to cross. To make matters worse, the weather hadn't improved by February. Chief Uray even told them that no youth would try to make that journey in those conditions. It would be certain death. The safest thing to do was to accept the chief's offer and wait the winter out. Unfortunately, they were also worried that other groups would hit all of the goals before they got there. They were just one of many groups who were making the trip in search of riches. So, after a meeting, the group decided to leave half the party behind to look after the horses and wagons till spring. At the same time, the other half would try to make their way to Los Pinos Indian Agency. Chief Lurie realized there was no way he could talk them out of it, so he gave them some directions to help them get over the mountains in one piece. He said the best bet was to drop down to the Gunnison River and follow it before going north to the agency. Alfred, on the other hand, was insisting it would be better to cross the mountains directly rather than going around. He claimed he knew that area. That way was a lot quicker, and for some reason, 5 of the men believed him. The chief then gave each the group's food, and then the group that didn't have Alfred in it set off along the river. And just as the chief had warned them, the journey was brutally cold. The freezing winter had made falling the river difficult. The food had ran out long before they reached the agency. They would have even starved to death if they hadn't been found by some cowhands working in the area. These men then fed them and let them stay with them at their cattle camp until spring. In April, when the weather improved, the peaceful men finally made their way to the agency and got there in May. To their surprise, Alfred had already been there and left, but only Alfred and the others had been with him. According to the expedition's leader, after leaving the Ute, Alfred's party followed the river on horseback until the horses couldn't get any further. The leader then offloaded their provisions and walked the back to the Ute camp. It's thought that they continued to walk down the river a bit further and then took a path high into the mountains. Importantly, when the leader dropped them off, he knew they didn't have enough supplies to get to the agency, but he just had enough of arguing with Alfred. Afterward, they only had about 14 days of food, nothing they needed for a winter hike in the mountains. Their clothes weren't adequate to keep them warm, and they had no snowshoes or flints and hardly any matches. They only had a few rifles, 1 pistol, a hatchet, and some knives. After the expedition lead turned back, no one heard from any of these men again until months later when Alfred burst into the mess hall at the agency. And from the beginning, something seemed strange. Alfred told the workers who started, by the look of them, he'd eaten quite a lot of rabbits and rosebuds. They'd seen men trapped in the wilderness before, and they'd usually all been brought to skeletons. They typically didn't show up with a bloated face and a well-filled belly like Alfred had. When Alfred claimed to be feeling a bit better, he headed to the nearest town, which was Sauvage. While he was there, he got himself a room in the saloon and spent over $100 on drinking and gambling. That's around $3,800 in 2023. Then he spent another $78 in the general store. When he drank, he often gave conflicting stories about what had happened. Some people even said that he had a different wallet every time he went out, and he never seemed to run out of cash. He'd sold his rifle when he was back at the agency, but all he got for that was $10. It didn't explain the rest of the money. He didn't even seem to be any good at gambling. Preston Nutter was the man who arrived at the agency in May, and he was the leader of the other party that followed the river. After leaving the agency, he also went to Sauvage in search of answers. And probably because he already knew Alfred was a liar, Preston was immediately suspicious about Alfred's story. He told General Adams that there was no way the other men would have left him for dead. The rifle he'd sold belonged to an old man who was with Alfred's group, and the pipe Alfred had left behind was owned by another one of the men named Shannon Bell. In addition to all of that, when Alfred originally joined the group, he had no money. Following this revelation, the general took a man on horseback to get Alfred and bring him in for questioning. When Alfred got back, the general and his men wanted to know where Alfred had gotten the money. They also wanted to know why he had some of the other men's things, and how he managed to not only survive the mountains, but to turn up well-fed. In response, Alfred first claimed that he'd gotten his feet wet and cold and had to stay by the fire while the others went to look for food. When they didn't return, he assumed they'd abandoned him. To Preston, though, the story made no sense. The other men were prospectors. Even if he wasn't a great guide, he was better than no guide. Eventually, a council was formed to get to the bottom of it. Then, right as the meeting was starting, 2 members of the Ute tribe arrived at the agency with pieces of flesh, which they claimed came from a human found on a hill close to the agency. Upon seeing this, Alfred panicked and then fainted, and then when he woke up, he begged for mercy, and as he sobbed, he told a different story. Before beginning, though, he was reported as saying, quote, "It would not be the first time that people had been obliged to eat each other when they were hungry." Alfred then went on to explain that 10 days into their journey, they'd run out of food. The oldest man had died first, and because they were all so hungry, the others ate him and took his rifle. 5 days later, another man died, and they ate him as well. They also went through his pocket and found $133. Not long after that, another man who was with them died, but Alfred wasn't there when it happened because he would get wood for the fire.
Guys. Eyes, focus. It's something you have to go since you're a little girl. It's all you. Let's go. Vamos.
Trillions of signals to reach audiences at the right time and place, delivering the results all marketers chase.
The remaining men then ate him too. Soon after that, the owner of the pipe, Shannon Bell, shot the remaining men. Then he and Alfred carried some of him with them for food on their journey and then covered up the rest. 2 weeks later, Shannon tried to kill him too. Alfred claimed that Shannon went mad and attacked him, and so in self-defense, Alfred shot him. Then a little while later, he managed to stumble into the agency. General Adams had this full confession written down, and he made Alfred sign it as a sworn statement. Obviously, Preston didn't believe any of this. He was sure that Alfred had killed them and stolen their things. It got so heated that at one point Preston dragged Alfred outside, and if others had intervened, he would have killed him then and there. After the scuffle was broken up, Alfred was arrested for manslaughter and imprisoned in a log cabin owned by the sheriff of Siraj. When summer came, General Adams took Alfred and some of the men to the mountains to try to find and retrieve bodies, but they couldn't find anything, so Alfred was returned to the cell. Later in August, while Alfred was waiting for trial, the youngster, John Randall, traveled through the mountains. As he came down the pass to reach Lake City, he walked by a tributary of the Gunnison River, close to the spot where Alfred had previously claimed to Mount Shannon. There, he noticed something sticking out of the ground. Immediately, he was hit by a terrible smell, and he stank was hard to take before he saw it was even worse. He found five men in each different state of decomposition and was cleared of all men by the tens. One of the men was low on their bones, and animals had gotten him out. Two of the men had clearly been hit in the head with something blunt. Another man who was identified as Shannon Bell had been stripped to the bones except for his hands and feet. It was clear he suffered a blood force injury to his head as well. From what remained, it was very clear there was a deliberate removal of the animal portions, and apart from the first man, it didn't look as though this was done by animals. Upon stumbling on this horrific scene, John stopped to take a sketch of it, and then he continued on and told the authorities in Lake City. They won't show the sketch here, but it is still available online. A little while later, a team of 20 volunteers set out and retrieved bodies. Upon examination, the coroner was sure they'd all been killed by a blow in the head while they were asleep. None of them had defensive wounds or injuries, and they all had similar markings on their skulls. Other evidence only making his voice for Alfred. All the men had rags on their feet, meaning they were probably hungry enough to lose the leather in their shoes when they ran into everything else. There was also a tractor and makeshift shelter, even to speculate that maybe Alfred had killed them for their possession, got stuck there when the leather turned bad, and didn't them to survive. Because of these findings, it was expected that Alfred's charges would be upgraded from manslaughter to first-degree murder. However, before this could happen, someone slipped Alfred a key, a pen, and some food so he could escape. To this day, it's not clear exactly who was responsible, but either way, at some point, Alfred slipped out of the cell and wasn't seen again for 9 years.
Dragonfly prices. It's a perfection.
Belgar is pro-quality, pro-innovation, and pro-partnership. But most of all, we're pro-contract. When it comes to building your business, Belgar paves the way.
In 1883, one of the original prospectors who stayed the winter with Chief Brewery a decade earlier had set up a shop selling supplies and shy in Wyoming. On March 11th, the man approached him, looking to stock up for a planter, and introduced himself as John Shores. So the man to John seemed familiar. For a second, that might be the same John Shores he'd spent time with at a Native American camp all those years ago. But when he looked again, he realized it wasn't John, it was Alfred. After the interaction, the man went on to tell the local sheriff he spotted a criminal, and Alfred was eventually arrested and taken to Denver. General Adams then traveled up to confirm it was Alfred, and after he confirmed it, didn't await for trial, and he asked Alfred, once again, what had really happened all those years ago. This time, Alfred came up with what would be his final story, one he more or less stuck to until he died. When Alfred's group left Orr's camp, they didn't have anywhere near enough food. The amount was basically only enough for a single woman to eat a week. Then on top of that, after 2 or 3 days, they were hit by a brutal snowstorm. They continued to track for this until they got to the base of the mountain. Then beyond that was a deep valley, and on the other side of the mountain, the snow was so deep they could barely walk. This forced them to get to higher ground, and already by day 4, they were planting pines of flower. For the next 10 days or so, they lived only on rosebuds and pine cones as they followed Rich to stay out of the deep snow. Apparently, several men were rough shaped by the fire and prayed to God, hoping he escaped alive. Eventually, they came with a lake and descended to camp by a river. They followed the stream for days until they reached a lake, possibly Lake San Cristobal, that at the time was frozen over. They decided to cross the lake to where refugees could be used for shelter. By then, they were exhausted and tension was rising. And while some of the men were desperate to break down, Shannon Bell was feeling something different. He was furious. He was mad at Alfred for getting them locked, and others for how pathetic he thought they were acting. And then one morning, Shannon was acting stranger than usual. According to Alfred, it seemed like he either had planned to survive or was going insane, or maybe both. That morning, he told Alfred to go out on his own, explore higher than and see if there's any way to get across. So Alfred took a pistol and set off, but all he found were steep slopes and more snow, both of which weren't very helpful. He would even admit to the general for the first time that although he was kind of a guy, he didn't really know what he was doing, and he didn't know that side of the mountains. It took him all day to scout ahead and come back, and then when he got back, he found Shannon sitting by the fire, eating a piece of meat. Other than stopped and looked around, he could see a man lying for the waste of the fire, and it was clear what had happened. Then he looked back from the shed and saw the other three men lying on the fire, not moving. Then he slowly approached the fire, and on noticing Alfred, Shannon rushed in with a hatchet and managed to shoot Shannon's stomach before he could reach him. Alfred then finished him off after he fell to the ground. Later that evening would be the worst night of his life. In a letter written later, he asked if anyone could imagine how he felt that night. In his own words, he was surrounded by quotes, the big horrors of starvation, as well as those of utter isolation. He also claimed he felt like he was losing his sanity, and he started to understand what happened to Shannon because it was beginning to happen to him. In another letter, he even said, quote, "The greatest wonder is that I never returned to a rational condition." The next morning, he tried to follow his tracks the day before, but between the snow and the exhaustion, he was forced to turn back. So next, he had a small shelter with a wood branch to keep him up, but that didn't to satisfy his ever-growing hunger. The group had spent enough time up there already and to know that hunger was a reliable source of food. So eventually, in desperation, they took a piece of meat Shannon had been eating, cooked it for him, and bit into it. Almost right away, the whole of what he was doing was overcome by the relief of relief, and he knew what he had to do to survive. He would then go to spend another 2 months there in a little shelter, surviving off the rest of his party. 60 days later, he spotted an avalanche that left yellow clay markings. This was an indication that he lived in an area known as Slum Valley Pass, which is known for which is when he found the money he later spent to watch. And like the others, he'd already eaten his shoes, so he found his weekly cloth, and sometimes he had to stop because his feet began to freeze. When that happened, he stopped and lit a fire to warm. Then, when he got close to the agency, he ate the last piece of meat and possibly dropped some, which were later found by the youth. He also admitted that when he went out with General Adams' search party a decade earlier, he took the men as far as mountains opposite the camp and did all he could to stop them from going further. He claimed that he really did want to take them further to show them the truth, but even more than that, he didn't want to go back and be reminded of the horror he'd been through. Alfred also told him the reason that he escaped and ran from trouble was because he feared that a mob might get past his guard and kill him. He'd already nearly been killed by Preston and others, so he thought sooner or later someone would finish the job. After escaping, he went to Arkansas using a fake name and worked on a ranch before eventually moving on to Arizona and then finally traveled to Cheyenne where he was bound. And that's the story that Alfred consistently told until the day he died. When his trial finally began, there were several parts of this story that were called into question. In particular, he was convinced that everything was deliberate and premeditated. It was thought that he had deliberately led the ministry with the intent to steal their possessions when any means necessary. His harrowing survival story afterward was just an attempt to cover up his actions after the crime. The prosecution would end up bringing in witness after witness to support this idea. Some of them were part of the original group of people who set up for Utah. One of them was Preston, who testified that Alfred was always trying to find out how much money they had. Other witnesses were brought in to testify to Alfred's behavior after he got his sworn in different accounts he told about the events. Then, when Alfred finally took the stand, his testimony didn't help his case either. He rambled on for 6 hours and admitted to even the other members of the party, but swore that he only killed Shannon. Shannon was responsible for everything else. After all the evidence was presented, the jury would have gone to find Alfred guilty of premeditated murder, theft, and several other charges. He was then sentenced to be hanged for his crimes. Before that could happen, though, Alfred's lawyers discovered a technicality. Colorado became a state in 1876, and prior to its statehood, Colorado Territory didn't a statute in which he could be tried for murder. It wasn't until after the crime had taken place that Colorado State established the specific laws for which he was being tried for. Because of this, conviction was overturned and he had to be retried for manslaughter instead of murder. In this new trial, Alfred again pled not guilty and stuck to his story, but this case was even more damning. The prosecution brought in hunters who said there was plenty of food for them, even bag, game, rabbits, deer, plenty of local hunt by someone as inexperienced as Alfred. They even went as far as saying that cannibalism had to have been well chosen because food had been so plentiful in the area. In addition to that, it was argued that, at the very least, even if he wasn't some malicious monster who premeditated the whole thing, he did still lead the group astray by hiking that more dangerous route in the winter under the guise of being a guide. In the best case scenario, he was extremely negligent, and so he was eventually found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. For this conviction, he received 40 years in prison, which is the maximum of 8 years per man. At the time, this was the longest prison sentence handed down in U.S. history. After being in prison, Alfred wrote to anyone he could, claiming the sentence was unjust, and he only told change that the jury was full of biased and prejudiced people. Eventually, Alfred's story brought to a woman named Polly Pry. Polly Pry was a reporter for the Denver Post, and like most people, after hearing Alfred's story, she kind of believed him. Because of this, she began to use her position as a reporter to try to help him. She would end up writing stories about him, making him out to be a man of the people. She tried to use as an ex-soldier who had been persecuted by the establishment and was selling pieces in the wrong place at the wrong time and survived the sort of most of us could imagine. She claimed the sentence was only so harsh because of the cannibalism, but anyone would have done the same in that situation. And incredibly, over time, her stories made such an impact that local businesses started to raise petitions for his release. Then, finally, after enough pressure, the Colorado governor paroled Alfred in 1901, which is 18 years into his sentence. In the over a century since the story took place, several different groups have done separate forensic analysis of the remains and compared them to Alfred's account of what happened. The conclusions of these groups have tended to lean in favor of Alfred being killed, with some showing defensiveness on some of the moments that were contrary to what should have been if Alfred was telling the truth. Like, for example, one group found marks across the forearm of Shannon Bell, which indicated he may have defended himself from an attack. In Alfred's account, Shannon was only shot once and then finished quickly. At the same time, there also seems to be some evidence that corroborates Alfred's story. In 1994 and 1862, Colt Revolver was found at the site of the murders. It was still loaded with 3 .38 caliber bullets, and these bullets matched fragments of lead found in Shannon Bell's head, suggesting that at least part of Alfred's story may have been true. After the prison, Alfred seemed to be a changed man. He went on to work at the Denver Post for the guards alone, who described him as kind, modest, and charitable, far from being grumpy, greedy, and untrustworthy after he had passed. He eventually moved out to a city known as Littleton, where he bought a common and went back to the prospecting. He eventually died in 1907 at 65 years old, and rumor has it he was a vegetarian when he died. I would take that with a grain of salt, however. So what do you think happened? Do you think Alfred was telling the truth? In some ways, it seems.
Our new vodka cocktail brings together some of our favorite refreshing summer flavors: watermelon, lime, a hint of mint, and a big splash of soda water. The perfect complement to our handcrafted cocktail. Now that's a cocktail made the right way.
In 1993, the Saturday Night Group sent me to a southern secondary mountain hiking exploring the wilderness. Unfortunately, somewhere deep in those mountains, something is so horrifying and confusing happens to them that it's still a mystery to this day. This is their story. As always, discretion is advised. Yadira Corby was known as a master of spycraft, and at 41 years old, she spent decades teaching mountaineering to young students in Kazakhstan. She was known to push people to their limits, sometimes beyond, to mold into the best hikers they could be. But despite her reputation being tough, her past students said she was as good a mentor as you could get, and many of them claimed to owe their lives to the skills she taught them. In 1993, an event known as the Julian Tourism Festival was taking place, and people representing tourism with mountain sports from all over Russia and surrounding countries gathered to camp and participate in competitions and explore the Rocky Mountains. During this festival, the new year wanted to see food of her favorite students, which was special and a little more challenging than usual. The Kamarkov Mountain, or a small chain in the former part of Russia's South Siberian Mountains, they sit near the border of Mongolia near the city of Irkutsk. They stretch 350 kilometers but they're still challenging and beautiful with a railroad that provides easy access. They're a popular destination for both tourists and mountaineers. In the summer, they can get quite humid. Temperatures hang around 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 15 to 18 Celsius. It also often rains heavily with thunderstorms rolling from the Waldo Plateau. But again, despite the dampness, they're considered a safe destination for hiking and an ideal spot for young hikers to explore the wilderness. The route the group had planned though wasn't one for the average tourist. Generally, trekking has 3 or 4 levels of difficulty depending on where you are. Russia used a 4-grade system at the time, starting with easy for beginners, moving up to moderate, where you walk up small hills for up to 4 hours or so per day, onto strenuous, where you spend much of the day climbing higher peaks, and then very strenuous or challenging, which sometimes uses no trail at all, and hikers will often travel along high ridges and over mountains from dawn to dusk. And how a route is graded comes down not only to how high you go and how long you'll be walking, but also how many skills you'll need, like knowing how to rock climb or navigate the wilderness. They're also graded in how physically and mentally fit you have to be to complete the route, and the route Ludmila and the group had chosen was a grade 4, which is the highest difficulty. Knowing this would be the most difficult track they'd ever done, they spent months leading up to preparing and training, and over the course of that time, Ludmila's tough love shaped them into both competent mountaineers and close friends. Finally, on August 2nd, the full group met up to catch the train to Irkutsk. In addition to Ludmila, there was Valentina, who generally went by the name Valia. Valia was 17 and had been walking the hills all her life and was known for being calm and collected in tough situations. Joining them was also 23-year-old Sasha. He and Ludmila were close, and she had known him since he was just a kid and often described him as being like a son to her. Sasha was also exceptionally fit and very experienced at this sort of challenging hike. He would act as almost a second coach next to Ludmila. There was also a 19-year-old Dennis, who was sort of an accidental member of the group. He only got his place in the trip when someone else dropped out because their parents wouldn't let them go. He was so excited to be part of the group that all he left was a short note for his parents that he was going to the mountains and he'd be back soon before leaving the house. Then there was also 24-year-old Tatiana, who loved walking mountains but had never attempted anything beyond a moderate grade 2. This was a chance for her to prove what she was made of, and after all the training they'd done, she felt like she was ready to handle anything. Next was Timur, who was the youngest in the group at just 15. He was essentially born to trek, though. He grew up in the mountains and hiking with his parents basically as soon as he was old enough to walk. And then finally, there was 16-year-old Victoria. She wasn't a natural mountaineer, but desperately wanted to be a part of the trip. At first, the others weren't happy about this because she'd had a temper tantrum on a winter hike earlier that year after getting tired. She wouldn't have even been there at all if her mother hadn't called Ludmila and begged her to take her along. But later, during training, she worked hard and regained the trust and friendship of the rest of the group. After meeting up, they started their journey by train from their home in Kazakhstan to Irkutsk. From there, they went to Burino, which is a town at the foot of the range and the perfect spot to set off from. On the way, they were joined by a couple of guys from Moscow, heading to the area to relax and fish by the Sniezhny River. Then, after arriving in Burino, the plan was to walk until August 5th and eventually meet up with another group led by Ludmila's daughter, Natalia. Both groups checked the weather forecasts, and things were looking good with above-average temperatures and just a little rain forecast for the next 4 days. The first 2 days went well, and the group took a slightly more unusual route than most, but in doing so, cut off a bunch of time that helped them summit several of the highest peaks ahead of schedule. They walked around 70 kilometers and crossed the Langotai Gorge, then across high plateaus over several rivers, and then up the highest in the Kamar-Daban range, known as Kanulu. Then on the third day, a cyclone coming up from Mongolia took the region by surprise and caused a day of rain that left the center of Irkutsk flooding up to people's knees. That same rain fell hard in the mountains, and at higher elevations, this turned to heavy snow, and the group was walking along a high ridge. The skies opened up, and the snow and rain came pouring down. Initially, they decided to press on as far as they could, worried they might miss the rendezvous with the other party. But then as they trudged down the mountain, soaking wet in the pouring rain and wind, realized it was too exhausting to continue. So at about 4 p.m., they decided that instead of heading through the forest to the planned camping spot, they'd set up camp in the open and get some rest. This really wasn't a great spot to camp because it was an exposed and windy patch between 2 mountains with just some rocks and brush for shelter. The ideal location under the tree line was another 4 kilometers away, but that was just too far to drag themselves and their drenched bags in the ice-cold rain. They obviously couldn't build a fire either, but that didn't dampen the mood. While the rain continued to come down, they did their best to enjoy the night, huddling in the 2 driest tents while talking about what they'd achieved in the hike so far. For some reason, maybe because they didn't want to get them wet on the inside, they never got their sleeping bags. They didn't even take them out of plastic wrap, and instead just fell asleep exhausted on the floor of their tents on plastic ground sheets. Unfortunately, that night was much better, and sleep would be short-lived. At 4 a.m., the ropes of the tent snapped, and they had to go inside to fix them. Not long after they'd done that, the wind tore the stake holding the tents down. Then, finally, after a wet and cold night, they woke up to snow covering most of the area. As they got up and cooked breakfast, they found that the snow had covered basically all the landmarks of the day before. After breakfast, at around 11:30, they set off toward the trees, hoping that tree cover would provide some shelter and help them to get their bearings. With any luck, they'd meet the other group ahead of time as they planned the night before. Unfortunately, this is where things took an almost unbelievable turn.
We define Bubba, Tyler.
Bubba? Bubba! Bonus. Bubba! I just want to pay you gold points. That's Gamba!
According to Valiant, just 10 meters into their trek down the hill, Sasha just fell over. They helped him to his feet, but he fell again. This time, he let out a piercing scream. Lyudmila told the rest of the group to keep moving while she returned to help, but in the meantime, inexplicably, Sasha was foaming at the mouth while blood started pouring from his eyes and ears. Valiant quickly covered the others and then told them to wait where they were and then ran back to Lyudmila and Sasha. In some accounts, Valiant claims Lyudmila died the same way as Sasha, but in others, she claims that she had a heart attack. Either way, to Valiant and the others' shock, Lyudmila passed out and collapsed on top of Sasha. Tatiana, Victoria, and Timur then climbed out from underneath their cover and rushed back to them, but almost immediately, Tatiana started grasping for air too and grabbing at her throat as if she was trying to force her airway open. Then, to everyone's horror, She ran to a nearby boulder and began hitting her head against it over and over until she finally was left to see the ground. Terrified and having just witnessed the horrific scene, Valley's throat dropped to the ground as well. Dennis, also horrified, was witnessing her crouch down and hit behind an outcropping rock and were trying to get inside a sleeping bag, holding and protecting from whatever was happening to the others. Finally, Valley snapped at him and composed herself, and crawled over to the door and found that she wasn't breathing. Then she went back to Smirk, who was by then hysterical, and lifted him onto his feet and told him to head for the trees. Next, she took Victoria by the arm and began pushing her up in front of her toward the forest. But Victoria went into a frenzy and started violently pulling away from Valley. Eventually, she bit Valley's hand, which caused her to let go, and then ran off toward the forest after Smirk. But unfortunately, Bane also didn't manage to get far before they both began to pile of blood and started clawing at their throats, just like Tatiana. Valley then watched as they started tearing their clothes as if they were both up inside, and they both collapsed to the ground. Dennis, who up until then had been overcome by whatever was happening to others, shouted to Valley and dumped all his sentences back at her. He then took off for the woods and she began tackling the bag, but almost as soon as he broke cover from the boulders, he began to choke up the others, bleeding from his face and his body seizing as he fell to the ground. Valley then looked around and saw that every single one of them was on the ground and not moving, and her normal calm turned into a massive adrenaline. So she got up, sprinted, and sprinted, and she kept running until she was deep inside the woods. Finally, she couldn't run again. She was far enough inside the forest away from the wind. In the calm that followed came, Valley tried to compose herself. Supposedly by now, the storm had become so strong that trees were falling like matches around her. She eventually spotted a crack in a cliffside and just wedged herself inside it to hide until the storm died down. While waiting, she thought about her family and she wondered about what might happen to her brother if she didn't return home. At the same time, she thought about everything she'd just seen and tried to make sense of it. It was like a literal nightmare that she couldn't wake up from.
You can't afford to not play with the Flint momentum. One proof, how about the industry's most efficient seed placement, automatic compaction management, and a fill-in tool with high vertical range in a high school basketball team. That's Fit. That's going bold.
A little while later, the storm had calmed down, and she had calmed down. She found what seemed like a safe spot inside the camp. She realized that thanks to Dennis, she still had cabinets in the center, which thankfully included a tent and plastic ground sheets and clothing. Finally, after setting everything up, she climbed inside her sleeping bag, threw her tent over her for extra warmth, and after completely laid down, fell into a deep sleep. The following day, she woke up cold and hungry, into a tent pitching a place to support her. Well, she had no choice but to go back to what she could see if she could find supplies and bodies to the rest of the group, which also meant potentially encountering whatever it was that had caused them to be across the day before. When she reached them, she cautiously approached and found they were still in the fallen. And after finding a map and some food for their house, she had the worst realization. She had no idea where she was. She had a map now, but the snow could have still made it impossible to spot landmarks. Instead, the best she could do was follow the tree line until she found something that she recognized on the map. So off she went down toward the forest again. 7 hours later, after walking across the mountain essentially all day, she spotted an abandoned electricity relay tower in the distance. With this new sign of civilization, she set off once again, eventually reaching it by nightfall. It seemed like as good a spot as any, set up camp, and as she did, she wanted to go down with her mother search and rescue after they messed their rendezvous. It seemed inevitable that soon enough, search and rescue would be scouring the area looking for them. Unfortunately, no one had discovered. When the Felix group didn't show up for the meeting, Natalia and the other team weren't worried. She knew they were strong hikers, and that her mother was a master, and there'd be nothing for her. She assumed the rain had just slowed them down, and she'd see them on when they got home. In the morning, and in the light of day, Valerie noticed how she'd slept under with just one big chain heading down the mountain. She guessed that if she followed them down the hill, they'd lead to somewhere she could find help. The route was difficult, and the forest overgrown with slow progress, but she eventually reached the end and found a small abandoned village that was once supplied by the electricity cable she followed. It was disappointing that no one was there, but then just beyond the houses was a major river. Since the tourism festival was taking place in the area, part of that was kayaking, canoeing, and fishing. She thought she could use the river to find it, or at least signal for help. By then, it was late again, so Valerie spent another night at the water tower before heading down to the bank to see if anyone had passed by. The following day was a much warmer day, began to take its toll on her already exhausted body. After walking for another several kilometers, she remembered that in training she had been shown how to use a sleeping bag to let rescue parties know to walk, so she draped her over a bush by the river, and then rested and waited hoping to be spotted. Not far from where she was, a kayaker named Alexander was taking a small group of fellows training down the Sneaking River. It had been a relaxing day, with a thin curtain of snow that lined the banks, making the area more picturesque than usual. The tourism festival made it quite a busy river, paddling and fishing down the shore. On his way out, they passed a couple of fishermen from Boston and West Gloves. They waved back, as was the custom, as the group dipped their paddles into clear water and continued on their way. As they floated along, they spotted a sleeping bag by the riverside until they reached the bed. Stood next to it was the emotionless expression of Valerie. Assuming she was another person out fishing the bank, they showed a greeting at her, but didn't get a response. Valerie didn't even really bother. Right away, something wasn't quite right about the girl, making them uneasy as they continued down the river. And although they didn't want to, soon enough, they just didn't have to turn back. It's here that the story begins to break up a bit. Some reports say that Valerie was covered in blood and became inconsolable when the kayakers approached, but according to the kayakers, their blood was blood. One of their kayakers also claims that she looked like she'd recently washed a hair against the river. When they got to her and asked what happened, she didn't say a word. She was too shocked and traumatized to speak. Instead, she buried her head into Alexander's chest and sobbed. The kayaker then wrapped her blanket to warm her up and dug up some antibiotics and other medicine to give her in case she had an infection. After she was buckled up, they all headed back down the river together. Before long, they bumped the same fishermen they had met earlier. Valerie instantly recognized them. They were the fishermen from Boston she met on the train. Upon seeing her, they smiled and waved and asked how the others were getting along. This is probably when Valerie broke down and talked, though it's not entirely clear. In a garbled frenzy, she told him what happened, and she told him the screams and the blood, and she told him the cold and the panic. She told him how the two youngest had run away, only to fall to the ground, and how Tatiana smashed her head against the rock. And obviously, after hearing this, her new friend was horrified and confused. None of what she said made sense. They decided to look after her from then on, helped her back out of the building, to let police know something had happened to the rest of the party. They even arranged for her train ticket back when it was all over. It took a few days before Valerie could tell the story in a way that anyone could understand. But once it was clear that something had happened to the others, the police commissioned a helicopter to go search for them. The weather and other factors made it impossible for them to get on the ground until August 25th, nearly 2 weeks after the incident. And as it happened, they weren't the only people missing in the region. 2 other hikers had been reported missing on August 17th. After 5 days of searching, they spotted the pair in the White Valley and found a good spot to wait for rescue, covered bush for their sleeping as they could have spotted. Then, right after the helicopter took off with the pair on board, they spotted the missing part, and it wasn't in plain sight. The body of the group was found in a small match, and some were held together while others were found getting stray, wearing thin tights. 3 of them were barefoot, apart from the 2 youngsters who tore up their clothes, which Valerie had to mention in her story. The bodies were eventually wrapped in plastic and flown to a nearby city for autopsy, and weirdly, the autopsy accounts They had all died from hypothermia, except for Vivian would die of a heart attack. They also had bruising in their lungs, suggesting some issues for this reason. More strictly, they were all living starving and found that critically low protein. So what caused these deaths is still a mystery. There are two ideas, some more likely than others, but they all have problems. One idea is that the accident witnessed a military experiment and were murdered to keep them quiet, and then their deaths were covered up by the police, which is lie down and still don't actually start an autopsy. After all, they had strayed from neutral, and who knows what the was in early years of post-Soviet Russia. This doesn't explain how Valley survived, however.
There's bags, athletic shoes, snacks, and donuts. Nothing to make.
On top of that, as far as we know, no one tried to shut it off after she told her story. After the incident, Valley said that college and left Kazakhstan for a new life. Now, in family, she only once spoke about the incident and swears she never will again. She claims that she just doesn't want to relive the nightmares. At the same time, she's never retracted the original story. If she had been coerced to keep it quiet, why would she tell them a story that only makes things more mysterious? Why not just say they froze to death because they weren't ready for such a big story? She was the one survivor. And that's another problem with these secret government operations. It's a popular area where a lot of people go hiking, and it's even more popular at the time because of the tourism festival. It seemed unlikely that a secret government project would use that spot in the mountains just a few hundred miles away from touching all the bones. So if it wasn't a government murder and cover-up, could the government have killed them accidentally? Russia has been known to use nerve agents in the past, and it even has a class of poisonous gases that fit the symptoms that Valley described. They were developed around 1993, and some reports claim they were tested in the Command region. This type of nerve agent was even famously used to assassinate a Russian double agent and his daughter in Salisbury in 2018. And if it was this nerve agent, some people think the rain might have had something to do with it. These poisons can dissolve in the water and hang around for long periods of time. And if they were testing the poison in the mountains in the weeks or months before the trip, the excess toxin would wash down in the rain. At some point that morning, Sasha might have accidentally stepped into a pool of that poison. Then, after stepping in, when Ludmila rushed over to help him, she was believed as well, followed by Tatiana, Victoria, and some other, and finally Dennis, who had crouching around, also became contaminated by poison groundwater. This theory could also explain why they waited so long to begin their search. They might have needed to make sure the area was clear. However, again, it doesn't explain how Val survived. She got to the first two victims before anyone else and touched the other with something who could have been contaminated. That should have been enough to kill them. On top of all of that, it would have just been the worst luck for those chemicals to have seized the ground just at the right time, in the right amount, to contaminate a single hiker, who then killed everyone else, all while never affecting anyone else anytime here. So another theory is that if they were poisoned, it didn't necessarily have to be a military nerve agent that they even said. Maybe it was just their drinking water that was poisoned. Climbing the climb of on mountains is Lake by Hall, as well as being a tourist attraction for beautiful landscapes and popular trails. It's also where tens of thousands of tons of toxic waste. Upon their pavement, I've been dumping chlorine and other nasty chemicals in the lake since 1966. And excrement and fuel have also been pumped in at least that long. One idea is that this on top of the water when it was downstream of Lake by Hall that morning, and they were hit by something like chlorine poison. But then again, how did Valley survive when no one else did? Likely only happened to this one group. You'd expect more reports of people being sick after topping up the water on the local stream, especially given how big and lake how close things can sit in these villages. But there is just no other reports. So if it wasn't nerve gas or something they drank, maybe they hadn't been poisoned at all. Maybe Valley was simply mistaken. Another theory is that the account that Valley told is simply combined trying to open trauma. Human brains don't remember things perfectly. That's because John's memory aims to keep a perfect record of what was done. Memory keeps hold of information that our brains don't try to experience in the future, bits and pieces that might one day help keep us alive. Some psychologists think that's why people seem to see the whole life flash before them. It's your brain's way of trying to find something in your life that can help you get out of the situation. At the same time, our brain goes from twist and restore remember how to think better sensitive, especially when it's traumatic. A group might have died of hypothermia if they can't get exposed, wet, hungry, and without flying to warming. Valeria might have survived because she was fitter than the others, had warmer clothing, was sleeping in a slightly warmer spot, and was just lucky. Then when she woke up, she would have found her friends dead or dying, some of them without their clothes due to paradoxical undressing, and then she could have panicked and hugged. When it happened, all of Valeria's symptoms had been older as it happened, that evening business place. But maybe she was. Valley couldn't go with that. As a survival matter, the danger of landing more constructive that truth and gave her a false memory happened. There wasn't just a poorly planned hydraulic, but some terrible, serious sickness that happened one to the other. The chief specialist with the Air Force Rescue Service thinks that this is no such recommendation. He puts down past psychosis caused by hypothermia shock. However, he pointed out that others survived and still sick. So why not them? He thinks that this might simply happen because they don't prepare for this, but at the same time, we expect the funds to get away because we know the astronauts need a reputation for accidents. So could that be true? They were supposed to prepare for anything. It doesn't explain how Valley's training was good enough to be relied, but not the others. So, when Valley confused program about what happened, so we promised the police the place knew. The Kamara Devon disaster might always remain a mystery. In any case, I'm curious to hear what all of you think happened, so let me know down in the comments which explanation you think was most likely.
Here we go, folks. We are talking about Vancouver Canucks center targets and the one guy whose name has been discussed at length. No, it's not Marco Rossi. Sorry. Today we're talking about Mason McTavish, and not necessarily any sort of an update in regards to McTavish in Vancouver, but more so a discussion that was brought up on the Harrison price as to where the value really lies and which assets the Vancouver Canucks could hypothetically send over to Anaheim to make a McTavish deal more likely. Now, you already know from the title and from the thumbnail, today we're talking about two Swedish demons. How sweet it is, folks, because today we are talking about Elias Pettersson. Elias and Tom Verlander over here. Two Vancouver Canucks prospects with very different progressions and very different stories heading into the 2025-2026 season. Now, Tom Verlander is the first round pick that the Vancouver Canucks had in 2023. The 11th overall. He's a player that some folks are projecting to being the next Charlie McAvoy. Frank Buffy had some very high praise for Verlander. There are a whole bunch of other analysts and scouts that have nothing but good things to say about this dude. Maybe he's not the next Quinn Hughes. Maybe he's not the next offensive dynamo, power play quarterback type of guy. But as an all-round, defensively capable, responsible, minutes-eating projection long-term, Tom Verlander has a lot of upside in that respect. Now, Elias Pettersson, on the other hand, is more of a defensive, snarly, physical guy who has a really booming slap shot and who came relatively out of nowhere compared to Verlander. Where Verlander was a first-round pick, Elias Pettersson was a third-round pick, and a guy who inevitably went down that same Alex Edler path from being a middle-round guy to working his way into the NHL lineup. Elias Pettersson, I'd say, plays kind of similar to Alex Edler, which is really interesting. He had 3 points in 28 games in his previous season. Yes, that number is not amazing, but still. The fact is, this guy was one of the most competent Canucks defensemen in the previous season, and he was so good that Vancouver didn't even want to send him down to Abbotsford to play their Calder Cup playoff run, which they were still able to win even without Elias Pettersson. The reason for the discussion today is a clip posted by Sakaris and Price on Twitter that asks whether or not it would be more expensive to go out there and get a 2C with Verlander or Pettersson. Who is the bigger trade chip? The question goes out there and asks. And the clip features Frank Corrado, Sekeres and Price all going out there and giving their opinions. The clip was posted yesterday, and you can see the three go out there and talk about it. And the reason I think this opens the door to a McTavish conversation, you're talking about the most valuable prospects in the system. These are probably the assets that you're looking at in some sort of a trade to bring in a bona fide size. McTavish is one of the guys that I think a lot of Canucks fans have been talking about. This article on CanucksDaily.com is a good one because it goes out there and transcribes a lot of what was talked about on this Sekeres home time. But of course, the reason we are reading it is because of the transcription here. Earlier this week, Matt Sekeres and Blake Price of Sekeres and Price wondered if the Vancouver Canucks would have to move on from someone like Elias Pettersson to land a player like Mason McTavish, a legit second-line centerman who is young and can help the club for many years to come. Price went out there and asked, would you trade that kind of left-shot defenseman for a surefire? And I think he is a surefire second-line center in Mason McTavish. I think the answer is yes. You do trade that guy, Price said. Sekeres then added, like, if you're going to sit here and tell me that Elias Pettersson turns into Jacob Slavin, then that would be a pause, because that's one of the best defensive defensemen on the planet, and a very, very valuable piece. But if he falls short of that, I think Jay Fresh has it mostly right. That's a second-pairing guy. He is still a valuable piece, particularly with the physicality, the energy that he plays with, but that's not as valuable as a second-line center. While Elias Pettersson could net the Vancouver Canucks a decent asset to help right now, former defenseman Frank Corrado believes that another Swedish prospect, Tom Belanger, is the bigger trade chip of the two. I still would think it's Belanger, Corrado said. I still would think the higher-end upside for what he can be. Right-handed shot. I think that's a harder commodity to come by. But you have to keep in mind, too, you have Mancini. But at the same time, you don't just move a guy just to move a guy because you think the other player is going to be an insurance policy. Like, if this organization ever decided they were going to move Belanger, I would say the return has to be so astronomical at this point because you just don't know what Belanger could be. He could be a 15, 25 minute per game stud at both sides of the puck, and you just don't know that yet. So that's why maybe you could get the most, but that's also why you would have to get something astronomical to do it. And you just have to go out there and ask, is Mason McTavish an astronomical enough price? I'm thinking about it like this. The Anaheim Ducks would go out there and match as much as they could in terms of an offer sheet. They would probably require the moving the stars to move on from Mason McTavish. And so, just a few years ago, there's tremendous value long-term with this guy. 22 years old, coming off of a 52-point season in 76 games. Sure, you can question whether or not there's a spot for McTavish on this team, but you can't deny the potential that does exist. And so, from Anaheim, they might be going out there and demanding an astronomical price. And Tom Belanger, because he has that potential, because he is a really young and up-and-coming right-handed defenseman, he can be, let's say, some sort of a McAvoy type. There is so much that you can look forward to. This guy could potentially be the true bona fide top right-handed defenseman on the Vancouver Canucks over Filipone. If Quinn Hughes decides to stay, Belanger and Hughes will be one of the top pairings in the league, in my opinion. Top 3, top 4 pairing in the NHL. I mean, only very few could come in between them. And Belanger just has so much hype that you would have to think his value is a little bit higher than Elias Pettersson. Here's what I'm thinking. Of course, it's a big meme that Elias Pettersson even exists on the Vancouver Canucks, that he's on this team with Elias and Marcus, so obviously Canucks fans want to keep him. But if Elias Pettersson is all that it takes to get McTavish, I seriously think about it, honestly. Like, there are already enough Canucks defensemen that you could move on from a DCD. in Linda, he is so valuable, and he's so young, and he's so fun to watch. You already have other names that are knocking on the doorstep of this decor. There are Thorbort's being brought back, you have Verlander, you have Mancini, you have all of these names. I think it makes it a little bit easier to shut away one of them. So, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. When it comes to a Mason McTavish trade, do you think about trading away Elias Pettersson?
All going to so expensive because it makes you run but it's so good. When I get to go for the first time, wow, unbelievable, performing the same, feels the same as a very expensive runner. And let's see.
I think we can all agree that being attacked by a bear ranks high among the worst possible things sun. This was especially true before modern medicine, but this still means even worse than that. This is the infamous story of a man who was mauled by a bear, broke wilderness, and left for dead by his companions. As a warning, although the events in this video are fleeting and non-descriptive, they are still highly disturbing, so your discretion is advised. The story of Hugh Glass is a bit unique one compared to the other stories featured on the channel, which are typically tirelessly researched for accuracy and compiled from a variety of sources. Before we even begin the story of Hugh's life, in the interest of full transparency, you have to establish that much of it is unverified and the account about it lies somewhere on the spectrum between fact and fiction. Much of what is known about Hugh has been passed down through word of mouth, which is obviously prone to exaggerations and incorrect retellings. In addition, because it's been featured so heavily in popular culture in recent decades, it's close to impossible to separate the authentic from the inauthentic anymore. It's probably most well known as the inspiration behind the award-winning book Revenant in 2015, in which Hugh was played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Much of the plot is similar to Hugh's story, but many of the details in the movie are unverified, uncertain, or outright false. So to tell this story, I'll speak in certainty, but take everything with a grain of salt. Where appropriate, I'll also present you different variations of certain events to present a full picture, full line of man, and a man on the board. So with all of that said, he was probably born in Springs, Pennsylvania, around 1782 to Irish ancestry, and nothing is known about his childhood and upbringing over the adult. The legend began in the early 30s, when his son was forsaking the abandoned his wife and two sons to start a new life as a sea captain off the coast of Texas. In 1860, his ship was attacked by pirates, captured the infamous body Jean Lafitte, and afterward, he and the crew of the boys were offered two choices, either to join them and become pirates or to suffer an agonizing death. The choice required very little consideration, and Hugh then spent up to 2 years robbing, pillaging, plundering, and killing from the fleet, so he escaped in 1818. Afterward, upon his companion, Hugh successfully traversed from Galveston Island through the shallows of the Gulf of Mexico and on to mainland Texas, but they weren't under trouble just yet. He and his companion then headed north, and as they did, they tracked through territory belonging to some of the more hostile Native American tribes. The Caracalla, for example, which occupied much of the Texas coast, was known to be cannibalistic, and they invaded through the area without being detected. As they went further north, they also crossed into Comanche and Kiowa territory. They successfully evaded them too, but they eventually captured by the Pawnee in what is now the state of Kansas. The Pawnees weren't known to be cannibals, but they did practice human sacrifice. Most often, this involved a young captive woman as the central figure in the ceremony, known as the Morning Star Ritual. Instead of a young woman in this case, the Pontiff decided to use humans and take, starting with the Comanche. They then tied the man to a stake and embedded pine slivers into his skin, then lit them on fire. Once these burned under the candle, his companion was engulfed in smoke until there was nothing left. It was clear to him that he was next and there was nowhere to run, so in an effort to appease the king and forget to spare his life, Cinnabar was occupied authentic. Cinnabar was commonly used to make red war paint, makeup, and powder decoration, and afterwards the chief took an immediate liking to him. Incredibly, he was then welcomed into the community and lived with the Pontiff for 4 years before leaving. Up to this point, Hugh had always been described as exceedingly brave, bold, and smart, but it was the Pawnee who taught him how to survive and thrive in the wild. When he finally left the tribe in 1822, he came across an ad calling for 100 men to join General William Henry Ashland on a fur trading expedition up the Missouri River. It wouldn't be until the following year when he joined what was known as an Ashley 100, and he set off with them in search of beaver pelts more than 1,500 miles up the Missouri River. For months afterward, the men paddled their boats upstream and were constantly cautious of potential encounters with hostile Native American tribes. Then, in what is today South Dakota, Ashley's 100 entered territory belonging to the Arikara, which is a tribe that played a role in restoring Lewis and Clark on their expedition to the west. Lewis and Clark famously encountered the Arikara in 1804 and convinced them to send a delegation to Washington, D.C., which they did the following year. Unfortunately, while in Washington, the Arikara chief died, and the tribe blamed the settlers. From then on, the Arikara were a violent threat to settlers coming to their territory. At least that was something that had been observed on several occasions. In addition, this tribe, like many tribes, settled near rivers and streams, so when Ashley's 100 came paddling up the river, they eventually floated into a village. However, unexpectedly, the tribe was welcoming of the expedition, and the two sides arranged several trades. Once the trade was complete, though, the Arikara turned on Ashley's 100 and attacked, killing 12 and wounding another dozen, including Hugh. The group did escape, however, and 3 months after escaping, continuing up the Missouri River, the survivors were on dry land and walking 300 miles to a fur trading fort. Still very much in Arikara territory, though, the party had to be careful and quiet to keep from being found. At the same time, survival required them to shoot a deer or buffalo every day or two, and the gunshots could be heard from miles around. So inevitably, in June of 1823, the party was attacked again by the Arikara, reducing their numbers even more. The two-time survivors then finally made their way to Fort Kiowa to regroup and rest. While staying there, the party was joined by a man named Andrew Henry, who was Ashley's expedition partner, and he was put in charge of a small group that was sent west to the Yellowstone River. Hugh was among this group, and when they reached the forks of the Grand River in what is now South Dakota, the men split up to scout for game. Then, while slowly treading through the forest, Hugh came around the tree and startled a grizzly bear and her 2 cubs. Hugh's rifle wasn't nearly enough to take down a charging bear, but he didn't have enough time to get a shot anyway. When the mother bear reached him, she swiped at Hugh's foot and lashed her jaws at the back of his neck before taking him off and swinging around. Now, what happened next is up for debate, and I also want to give a warning. It's as brief and non-descriptive as possible, but Hugh's injuries were still extensive.
But you would teach you to research the animal bricks blister trees has bullets in every bite.
When was the long time to keep telling us this? Find out feelings and key attention. In one version of the story, the bear continued to maul Hugh before he managed to kill the bear himself. In another, Hugh screamed for help and the others showed up and killed the bear. Whatever the truth is, Hugh was definitely attacked by a bear and was no doubt in extremely bad shape as his injuries were well documented in journals by others in the party. The bear attack had resulted in a cut in his throat that was nearly so bad that his breath could be seen escaping through it when he exhaled. He also had large wounds throughout his body, including his scalp, and the other wound of death was so deep that his ribcage was visible. Even more horrifying, because his work was so overcome that the near settlement was the Fort Bay accident hundreds of miles away. Even if there was these close, there were this other members of the group that he wasn't going to survive long. He was conscious of the slavery and he couldn't see it at all. To the surprise of the others, however, Hugh managed to make it through the first night, and then the few days that followed, but they were still convinced it was only a matter of time before he succumbed to his injuries. With him surviving longer than they expected, and them still need to continue their journey, Andrew called for someone to fashion a makeshift structure so they could carry him until he passed away. This drastically slowed him down, and after a few days of hauling on the difficult terrain, Andrew asked 2 of the men to stay behind him until he died while the others went ahead. Because there was extra money for those who volunteered, a man named John stepped forward, and right behind him was another man named Jim, who was just 19 years old. He elected to stay as a show of respect for Hugh, and he wanted to make sure he had a fitting burial when he died. With that, the others resumed their journey while the 2 volunteers started digging Hugh's grave. In the days that followed, John and Jim managed to give Hugh some water and passed on his throat, expecting those to first take him in unconsciousness. Then, roughly some years later, the end was imminent. One version still exists, but it was an indication that John, the work was done between John and Jim together, writing books, nights, swings, and others like who no longer control parties direct the rest of the John and Jim's. In another account, John and Jim were attacked by an Arikara warrior and had to run off, taking Hugh's rifle with them. Although the first version is seen as much more likely to his followers. By the way, the that these cases seemed to be where every word to it said he took his belongings and physically they were essentially dead. Whether this drove him to survive or not, he was fever broke after more than that their lives started to the rifle momentum was settling in some way, and in his mind, he said getting back. Like he could, he finally looked down until his doctor was injured and had to be horrible to see him with the sensory loss. This wound was like infected and many. Now, as disturbing as that is, it's connection, practically some third, he tried to kill him. Rather than left it as it was. After that, the next word he was on was a buffalo bear that the man could make some of the berries from. He then ground the tiny berries into a paste and mixed it with spring for the